And we're happy that we have David Abdullah with us, and we will be able to continue from our session last week. As I told you, 1 week and the world has been changed. In 1 week, there's been a tremendous change in the whole world. The whole world is in lockdown, and this has happened for the first time in human history. This is a unique phenomenon in history, and we need to look at the subject from many different angles, and I have looked at it from the angle of Islamic eschatology over the last 45 minutes. But welcome back, David.
Thank you very much.
And we enjoyed the last session. Many of our listening and viewing audience around the world appreciated our last session, in which we look at the background information that you could give. I did not know it. I've learned a lot from you. And today we want to continue from where we left off, David, particularly as it pertains to the coronavirus and the economy.
Yes.
But after that, I want to come back. We have only 45 minutes. I want to come back to economic theory, economic philosophy, economic system. Now then, David, a unique situation has arisen in the world over the last 1 week. Lockdown all over the world. And businesses are closing. Restaurants are closing. Bars are closing. People are losing their jobs. Businesses are collapsing. The number of unemployed people will be constantly increasing. David, the rich are going to get richer.
Ultimately, yes. If we look back at the Great Recession of the 1920s, Wall Street crash, 1929, coming out of that, of course, some wealthy people lost money, but there was, coming out of that, a concentration of wealth and income. As large corporations were able to buy out smaller ones, and so you got a concentration of wealth and income and ownership arising out of that. Coming out of the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, all of the economic data have demonstrated that, again, there has been a greater concentration of ownership and wealth and income in the hands of fewer and fewer people. The 1%, the global 1%, control much more of the world's wealth and income today than they did in 2006, for example. So yes, the rich tend to get richer after crises for several reasons. At the lower end of the income scale, people, as you were saying, lose their jobs, in some cases lose their homes if they were not unable to pay their mortgages and so on. Small business people, self-employed people lose their firms, and at the top end, the wealthy are then able to fill that vacuum in terms of ownership and control of assets globally. So that has been the historical tendency, and I'm sure that is going to happen again. Now, the markets, the stock markets, have collapsed over the last week and a half. And coming out of that, of course, trillions of dollars, it's kind of strange to say, trillions of dollars of wealth got wiped out with the fall of stock market prices.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'd be much happier if you say trillions of fictitious money has been wiped out.
Well, yes. I mean, it's paper money in that sense. It's not real assets. One of the things that happens in a situation like that, though, is that people who have pension funds which are invested in the stock exchange, in the United States, a lot of people have what is called 401 pension plans. Their savings will get substantially wiped out when the stock market collapses like that. Our Heritage and Stabilization Fund and other sovereign wealth funds that have monies invested in the stock exchange, they too, and we too, will lose because of that, because the value of the stocks and shares that we own declined. So yes, that is going to happen to us, but what on the other hand happens is that the large corporations, when their share price falls, ultimately it will rebound. and they will catch themselves. It is those people who maybe have pensions and so on, they will not necessarily regain their position. So you're right, there tends to be, after a crisis like this, a shift in wealth and income.
When the rebound takes place, they'll be able to buy out everything at peanut prices.
Yes, they buy out now. They buy out now at low prices, and when the prices go up, they then accumulate much more income.
So would I be correct in saying that you and your party and your people in the labor movement here in Trinidad and Tobago are of the view that at this point in time, as a consequence of a biological attack, there are terrifying economic implications?
Oh yes, at many different levels. If we just go through them one by one, our foreign exchange earnings is going to go down, has already gone down, because oil prices, gas prices have fallen, ammonia, methanol prices have fallen, LNG prices have fallen. Those are our primary export earnings. We already see a large petrochemical plant in Port Lisa's Methanex shutting down. So our foreign exchange earnings are going to go down. On the other hand, the imports of our food and other key essential items, medicine and so many other things, the cost of that might likely rise, because if there's a global shortage of food, which some people are now suggesting may very well happen in the not too distant future, then the simple situation that supply falls, demand remains the same, prices will go up, and therefore the prices of our imported items are going to increase. And so we're already in a difficult foreign exchange situation. Yes, we have reserves, but we have been depleting those reserves over the last 6-7 years. So in this situation now, we are likely to deplete those reserves more quickly. So foreign exchange is a problem. In terms of government's budget, Minister of Finance has already said that he had a $5 billion deficit, gap between his revenue and his expenditure, at the start of the financial year in October last year. With this situation, with falling oil prices and a declining economy as businesses close, there's less value-added tax to be collected, people lose their jobs, less income taxes to be collected, and so on and so on. Companies not having as much sales, they will pay less taxes as well. So the economy, as it contracts, plus the fall in oil prices and all those other things that have been happening, means that government is not going to collect as much revenue. And therefore, the gap between its expenditure and its revenue is going to increase. He estimated another $4 billion. I think it's going to be bigger than that. So therefore, this year we might have a $10 billion TT dollar deficit gap between revenue and expenditure. Now, that is, as economists say, all things being equal. What is happening, though, is the government now is going to have to spend more money in terms of some of the programs they have announced, and I don't think that it's sufficient, but they've already announced some additional social programs and so on. That then means that expenditure is going to increase. So revenue is falling significantly, expenditure is increasing, so the government's debt is going to increase unless they do something very different, and therefore our debt for generations to come is going to be more and more onerous. So at level now of the ordinary citizen, those people who work in restaurants, bars, casinos, a lot of people work there, although I don't like casinos, all of those businesses, malls, stores, because people are not going to the malls very much, people are not going out and about, taxi drivers, maxi owners and drivers, people are not traveling as much. All of those categories of workers already have begun to either lose their jobs or get their hours of work reduced or not going to be paid in this period here. So that's a huge number of people. Then there are a lot of people who have small businesses. Some people have small bars, small restaurants. They're going to be affected. Small shop owners, they're going to be affected. So there's a whole range of small business people who are also going to be affected by this virus and the economic implications of the virus. So it's really a situation which, in my view, we have to try to keep incomes of working people as whole as possible. Because if we don't keep enough income in people's pocket, then they can't spend. If they can't spend, then businesses can't have sales and they're in trouble. And what you then have happening is a spiral downwards. And we go into a deep recession or a depression. And that is a very dangerous place to be because it's much harder to get out of it whenever the health issue is no longer on the table.
David, I don't want to interrupt you at all, but I have a thousand questions to ask, 1,000 subjects to raise up, and we have limited time left, so you're going to have to come back again and again, David. But before we turn to what I have described as the terrifying economic implications, and I'm talking about what appears to me to be a master plan to wipe out the masses so that the world will be ruled by the rich. Before we return to that, and of course we want to know why are they doing this? What is the end plan?
Yeah.
Before we return to that, I want to turn to the free and the fair market. A free and a fair market is one in which demand and supply will determine prices.
Yes.
That when there is an increase in demand and supply cannot meet demand, then the prices will rise.
Correct.
And when there's a surplus of supply and there's not sufficient demand, then prices will decline.
Yes.
But if demand increases as a consequence, for example, of an abnormal situation as now obtained, and there is an adequate supply, and yet the prices rise, would that not be price gouging?
It is, and that is an issue that I raised quite some time ago. It's happening not only in Trinidad and Tobago, it's happening in the UK and the US and Canada, places where one would have thought that the so-called market, as you described it, would be working efficiently. But you have panic buying, and therefore you get shortages of some items, and you have unscrupulous business people who say, okay, we are going to put the price up, and people will pay the opportunity cost, which is not really the market price between actual supply and demand, but is what people are prepared to pay in this moment of uncertainty. It's like some people wanting to go into a show, and you have the scalpers with the tickets outside, and because all the tickets are sold out at the normal outlets, and people are prepared to pay twice the price of the ticket from the scalper than the actual selling price, because they so desperately want to get into the show. And so there's an opportunity cost which is above that of the actual, the real price.
Well, David,
and so you get profiteering.
I am directing attention to a specific instance which is now obtaining in the world. I'm not talking about when supply is inadequate to fulfill demand. I'm talking about a situation when there's adequate supply, but panic buying, as obtained now, and there's no economic justification for raising the price because you have an adequate supply. I said, is this not price gouging, and how do we respond to it?
Yes, so it is price gouging because, you see, the perception of the consumer is that there's a shortage, even though there is in fact an adequate supply. But there's a perception that if I don't buy today, there may not be enough tomorrow, when in fact the supply is okay. The supply will supply you today, tomorrow, next week. But people are now panicking, and therefore the shelves empty. The shelves will be filled back up tomorrow, and so the persons who are selling are putting the price up on price gouging.
What I was hoping to get was a denunciation
of price gouging
from the moral perspective, the morality of economics. That here is a moment in time when the masses must rise up and denounce as scoundrels, as absolute scoundrels, those who raise their price
Oh, yes.
because of an increase in demand, perhaps because of panic buying or whatever, raise their price even though there's an adequate supply.
Yes.
And
Yes, I agree with you 100%. People like that are totally dishonest.
that's the word I'm looking
They're
for.
totally dishonest. Yes.
That's the word I was
and
looking
not only
for.
dishonest, it's worse than that because they're actually preying on PREY. They're preying on the vulnerability and the fears of people. And therefore, they're really abusing people in the worst possible way. It is like somebody who is desperate for a little bit of water because they have been very thirsty. And so the person says, okay, you could have this water, which he got from the tap, the water tap, but he's now going to charge $20 for a cup of water. It is the worst form of exploitation that you could find because it is preying on people's vulnerability.
MashaAllah. Yes. David, you've answered me, and I want to give this answer to you in London. I want to give you this answer in Mombasa. I want to give this one in Bombay. I want to give it to you in Kuala Lumpur, in Jakarta, wherever you are. That this is dishonesty. You are a scoundrel, and we denounce you, and we ask the masses to boycott you in the future. If you raise your price because of an increase in demand, maybe because of panic buying, but the rise in price is not because of a supply decrease, that you do not have adequate supplies. You have adequate supplies, but you are exploiting the situation for unjust advantage and unjust gain. It is dishonesty. That's the answer I was looking for.
Dishonest.
Now then we can return.
Yes.
We can return to our subject.
Yes.
And that is that billions are being wiped out in the stock market.
Trillions.
Trillions.
Yes.
And I interrupted you.
Yes.
I said this was not money which was being wiped out. I said this was fictitious money. And we'd like to return, therefore, now to monetary economics in the little time that we have.
Yes.
David, I hold the view, and many on my part of the world of Islam, we are of the view that the monetary system which now exists in the world, which came with modern Western civilization, which replaced the gold and silver, the real money, and real money meaning money with intrinsic value. The value of the money is in the money, and therefore you cannot manufacture money out of thin air. That money was removed from the market and replaced with this money. And the International Monetary Fund, which came out of Bretton Woods, which you must have studied at university, the International Monetary Fund has prohibited the use of this money, real money, as money. And we are of the opinion, David, and we'd like to hear your views on this subject. The reason why they have prohibited the use of gold and silver as money is because if real money comes in the market, it'll wipe out their bogus money.
Yes. Well, you remember at Bretton Woods, there was the establishment of the gold standard. I'm trying to remember the exact amount. It was 35, what was it, $35 to 1 ounce of gold, I think
35.
it was. Yes. And then...
But only for the US dollar.
For the US dollar, that is correct. But then other currencies got pegged to the US dollar, and therefore most currencies had a relationship to an ounce of gold. Now, in the 1970s, the US economy was in crisis. The price of oil had gone up, and the US was a big oil importer. It was running large budget deficits and so on. There had been, in the 60s and 70s, the move to a new international economic order. Third world countries, so-called third world countries, countries of the global south, had been nationalizing industries and demanding more and a fairer share for the exploitation of our natural resources, bauxite, copper, oil, of course, and so on. OPEC had been very strong. And what happened in that situation was that President Nixon at the time, the US president, decided to abdicate, if you wish, or to end that unilaterally, end that arrangement of the US dollar being pegged to the gold standard. And that was the beginning, if you wish, of a huge wash of dollars, printed money essentially, then swirling around the world. And the places where it found a location to be invested was, of course, the stock exchange. Now, what has happened is that with technology, computerization, information technology, where you now move money by the click of a computer mouse, and you can therefore, with deregulation and liberalization not only of trade, but complete liberalization of economies, where there are no controls over the movement of capital, of movement of money, you then develop what is popularly called the casino economy, where there's speculation, where those who are holding money in hedge funds, investment funds, all these investment banks and so on, they then engage in pure speculation, casino activity, by betting on stocks, shares, commodities, currencies, a whole range of things in order to accumulate money. So money, capital used to be multiplied by investing in real production, in factories, to produce real goods and services. And the actual production of those goods and services would generate a profit. And out of that profit, the banks would be repaid the loans that they had made and so on. So money used to be invested, capital used to be invested in productive activity or in businesses that would sell goods, what the Americans call Main Street. So a bank will lend a business money to set up a laundromat or a supermarket or a car wash, whatever it is. Out of the profits, the bank will get back the loan with interest, and therefore capital would expand on the basis of the loan plus interest. Now, most capital is not invested in real economic activity, productive activity, or for the expansion of the sale of services. Most capital is invested in speculative activity. So I am sitting, if I'm an investment banker with JP Morgan or Credit Suisse or whoever it is, I have a portfolio of $100 million US dollars. What do I do with that? I'm not investing in your business to expand your factory. I am now saying, okay, I am betting that the Japanese yen is going to appreciate against the US dollar. So I'm going to buy Japanese yen today, hoping in the morning, hoping that by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Japanese yen has gone up in value against the US dollar. When it goes up in value, I then sell my yen and make a profit. And so it is speculating not in real economic activity, it's speculating in things that are not real, exchange rates. I buy oil today at $22 a barrel because the price of oil went down, because I think now that there's going to be some rapprochement between OPEC or rather the Saudis and the Russians and the Americans over the price of oil. I think the price of oil could go up tomorrow to $25 a barrel. So I buy $50 million US dollars worth of oil, which is not actual oil. It is a future production of oil at $22 a barrel. And if it goes up to $25 a barrel, I made a big profit. And I sell. And then tomorrow I buy something else, gold, and I sell. And so I'm constantly engaging in speculation. Now, of course, it's a gamble, because if I gamble that the price of oil will go up to $25 this afternoon and it falls from 22 down to 19, I've lost money. But in that sense. And therefore, people take huge risks. And that is where now, as the stock market crashed, and what is also happening is that artificial intelligence has now been part of the equation, where these investment bankers have invested in artificial intelligence so that their capital, they themselves sometimes don't make the decision, but they program computers with factors. And if those factors, say for example, one factor is a pandemic, a health pandemic, after 5 countries lock down, the algorithm says, okay, that means that we're going to have to sell shares. The algorithm automatically starts to sell, and it goes beyond human decision making. So the speculative environment and the casino economy has become almost a life of its own, and is totally detached and unattached from the real world of people working in restaurants, bars, hotels, cruise ships, airlines, factories, and so on. Totally detached from that. But that power of capital is huge. It's huge because it can determine the fate of a country. Because if those factors then say the price of oil should be $5 a barrel, then Trinidad and Tobago will suck salt, as the going would say, old people would say.
What I wanted from you, David, is a discussion on monetary economics rather than finance.
Okay, so
you are,
well, the central banks and so on.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right in your comments on speculative transactions.
Yes.
What we'd like to add in Islam, you cannot sell that which you do not legally own. So you cannot buy an option and then sell that option. That is not a valid transaction. I don't know if our listening audience, viewing audience will understand. If I buy an option, I just pay this amount. I'm not actually buying the property. I'm just paying to buy the property, an option. And when the price rises, I sell the option. So I've never owned the property, but I've already made a profit on the transaction. That is an invalid, that's a haram, invalid transaction in Islam. You cannot sell that which you do not legally own.
Yes.
From the time you take full ownership, you then take full risks.
Yes.
And that's a valid transaction.
Yes.
When you take the full risk of the transaction, then you can either go up or down and take the price profit or take the loss.
Yes.
That's a valid transaction. So you are completely correct, but David, when this goes onto the internet, there are going to be legions of people out there who have already been studying monetary economics in Islam for the longest while, and they know what's happening. They know about Bretton Woods, they know about the IMF, they know about the monetary system and so on. So they're going to be making a lot of comments on your presentation just now on monetary economics. We are of the view that in order for money to qualify as money, valid money, it must have intrinsic value. And we are of the opinion that the master plan is to take the world for a ride by taking control of money, by transferring the world from real money to fictitious money. And we are seeing now movement in a particular direction here in this coronavirus, which is what I want to share with you and get your comment. That actually the master plan is to move away from national currencies, the Trinidad and Tobago dollar, the US dollar, the euro, and all of these things, and to go to cryptocurrencies. And then from cryptocurrencies, which is just a transition, the actual master plan is to move to one currency, one universal currency for all of mankind. And of course, it will be electronic. What is your comment on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. Now, I think where the challenge is the relationship between the major economic powers in the world. Mm-hmm. If the world was more unipolar, with the United States being dominant, I think that could be more likely to happen. I don't know that China, for example, which is challenging the United States for global dominance in terms of the economy and ultimately militarily and so on, will accept a one currency, because that would then, I think, compromise their own national agenda. And the Chinese, I think, do have a very long-term agenda, which is Chinese. And where China is a dominant power in the world. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of conflict, certainly over the next 20, 25, 30 years, between China and the United States. And the Europeans are trying to fashion a situation where they could defend Europe, Project Europe in the sense, against China and the United States at the same time. And then, of course, you factor in Russia. So I think we're going to have to look at that. And, of course, you're an expert in international relations. And I haven't been able to identify precisely how that is going to play out. I don't know if we can forecast how that is going to play out. But I think the battle between some of these hegemonic powers or rising hegemonic powers and so on will make a single global currency problematic in the coming 20, 25, 30 years. We don't know what is going to happen thereafter. I certainly can't forecast and think that far ahead. And it of course is also going to depend largely on what happens in Africa, what happens in the Middle East, and so on, Latin America. In other words, some people are suggesting that Africa, which is a huge continent, huge resources, large population, may very well itself, if the internal politics can be sorted out, may very well itself begin to emerge out of the colonial imperial domination under which it's been subjected into some form of prominence. I don't know. Those are factors which I think are going to emerge after you and I perhaps are no longer able to have this conversation.
Okay.
But I've gone in a different direction perhaps than you were looking at. But,
no, I think...
But I'm just saying that I think that there are agendas. The cryptocurrency, I think, is very problematic because it's not real. It's an electronic thing, and it's not backed by anything. It has no relationship to any physical goods or commodities or services that one can say there's a correlation between the value of the cryptocurrency and the value of actual goods and services. There's a complete disconnect there.
Okay. When next we meet, and I am hoping and praying that you will accept my invitation to come back again, we want to direct attention to what should people do at this time.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the elite.
Yes.
I'm talking about the masses, particularly those whose jobs are endangered, who have already lost their jobs, who can't sell anymore, they don't have money to pay their rent, and so on. We already had a neighbor who sent this yesterday to borrow money.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because that's all right. We've had some people who wanted to order books from me, not from Trinidad. Sorry, Sheikh, we have to cancel because we lost our jobs. So we want you, David, that we put our heads together to try to advise what can we do at this time.
Yes.
But returning to the system of money, yes, we agree with you that China will not bend its knee. And we agree with you that Russia will not bend her knee. And as a consequence, China and Russia, not so much India, not so much Brazil, not so much South Africa, the other 3 members of BRICS,
Yes.
that these do not really constitute obstacles, but China and Russia do constitute significant obstacles. And you are correct. Our perception, David, is because of our eschatology, is that they are using this virus, the coronavirus, for lockdown around the world in order to continue pursuing the agenda for one currency, one universal currency for all of mankind. And because these two formidable nuclear powers stand in the way, there is no alternative but war. Mm-hmm. And we are not the only ones who are anticipating a great war.
Yes.
It is there. I don't know about your religious scholarship. I know your father is a religious scholar.
Yes.
And I would dearly love to meet with him sometime. But Christian eschatology has a great war. They call it Armageddon. Jewish eschatology has the great war. Islamic eschatology has the great war. I cannot presume to speak for Hindu eschatology or Jewish eschatology. But if there is a Hindu scholar who can speak, I'd love to have him come and speak, because I have respect for Hinduism. I have respect for Buddhism. I wrote a book on Buddhism right here.
Exactly.
Okay. So we anticipate that there's a great war that is coming. And this global shutdown, lockdown, it's a magnificent diversion.
Well, you know, one of the concerns that I have, and I was sharing that with some of my colleagues, because we had a meeting yesterday of our party executive, is the rise of fascism as well. And of course, in that context, wars have always coincided with fascism. And the lockdowns, the closing of borders, the demonizing of people who are ethnically different from you and so on, by the United States, by Trump and others, in my view, are the populist foundations for fascism. And with the lockdown and the technology that states now possess to track their citizens, not only to intrude on privacy by listening in on your cell conversations and so on, using drones and satellites to know exactly where you are, but actually to track your physical location as you move from your home to the grocery, because that is now what they say is necessary to contain people from spreading the virus. That the technological power and people's sense of, okay, I'm going to concede to the state my rights and my freedoms because there's a greater good of the health crisis, is a very worrying tendency, because the state, having acquired that power and intrusion on people's rights and freedoms, is not likely to give them up and give them back to citizens. And so we're seeing seeds of militaristic rule, you know, so that the army moves in supposedly to help with a health crisis, but then the army remains permanently in communities and so on and so on and so on. I'm talking what is happening in France and in Italy and China and United States. National Guard gets called out to make sure people remain in their homes and so on. I think that is another very worrying development coming out of this virus at this moment. And you may very well get, in the context of the outcomes given the economic crisis, certain states saying, well, we need to now accumulate more resources, more wealth, more capital. And the only way for us to do that really is to defeat another state, another country, which is where the war arises.
Good. We have very little time left, David, and instead of 1,000 questions, I have about 3,000. I have 3,000 questions now left. My eyes are weeping that I don't have Lloyd Best with us still in the world. I would have loved to have love hear Lloyd Best speaking on this subject. The one man we have not as yet touched, and we have to deal with this man, is Dr. Eric Williams, the first Prime Minister of this country, and the author of that famous book, Capitalism and Slavery.
Yes.
And when next we meet, I am dearly longing to hear you talk about the relationship between Dr. Williams and his perception of the capitalist economy, and C.L.R. James and his perception of the socialist economy,
Yes.
and what led to the conflict between the two men. Dearly longing to hear you comment on the economic philosophy and the economic policies of the People's National Movement, which
Yes.
has led this country for so long. And to hear you talk about Basdeo Pantoute and his economic theory and his economic philosophy, the two men who have led this country so far. I don't think that Patrick Manning was much different from Dr. Williams, was he?
No, but he emerged at a different historical moment when the philosophy of neoliberalism, economic liberalism, as enunciated by what is known as the Washington Consensus, IMF, World Bank, IDB, US State Department, supported by the Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman, and so on, had become dominant. So structural adjustment, privatization, greater role of the private sector were part of Manning's economic philosophy.
We're going to have to wrap up now, but I thank Allah that we've had a very interesting session today, and I look forward, David, to welcoming you again another day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ami. Very happy to come back.
Thank you.